questions, and I think after meeting everyone, you already know it. But just want to ask a bit more, just very broadly, right? What's the sort of, what's the overall investment base you currently have? Are the sort of set amount of funds you have planned for this year from an investment standpoint? Specific portfolio areas that you're looking at?
We have about...
Just being very direct about the question.
Yeah, hardly direct. Yeah. I mean, so first thing is, I don't think there is any annual allocation. Right? It's not that you have to invest X amount in any one year. It's entirely dependent on the opportunity. What, however, is a constraint, if you were to look at it that way, that within a certain number of years, you need to make the investment, right? So that's the thing, not necessarily broken up on a yearly allocation. Second, in terms of the categories and sort of sectors and kinds of companies and so on, one of the important principles that SeedFund follows is that the growth in India, and first of all, it believes in the India growth opportunity. Two, the growth in India is going to be driven by domestic activity, domestic consumption. That is one underlying thing. Using India as a base for tackling overseas markets is sort of lower down in that priority, purely because the fund is such, and that we don't necessarily have the ability to assist a company overseas that's tackling markets outside of India. But if the center of gravity of the company is here, that is what the real focus is. So, for example, if the company is domiciled as a US entity, and you've got all your market opportunities lie in the US. It just so happens that you have a small back-end R&D operation here. That isn't the kind of company that we would be interested in. Yeah. So, therefore, if you look at the locus of activities of a consumer, so it would be pretty much all the things that we have talked about here, right? Whether it's music, whether it's investments, whether it's education, whether it's travel, whether it's finding people with similar interests, right? Then companies trying to use analytics for determining consumer trends, CRM stuff, things of that nature, right? So that's pretty much.
No, I mean I think he said it very well. It's just that the center of gravity needs to be in India.
India.
I mean, not against a global product or anything like that. But if you're tackling a large enterprise clients in overseas markets, then by and large you need to have feet on the street there. Your CMO, your CEO needs to be, CXOs need to be there. So those, I think, we feel that we cannot add value, and we really don't want to invest in a back end.
So
but if you can,
before I move back to India, right? We grew the company at scale. So the sort of exits investors look for there in the States, are they sort of potentially different from the sort of exits you're looking for domestically? It's a little different, right?
No, I'll tell you, if you look at the last 10 years, right, of companies in India, exits has been one issue that has pained everyone.
Yeah.
The entrepreneur as well as the investor. So everybody is continuing to do this, largely driven by adrenaline and hope. Right? Because if you look at the total number of exits, the returns out of them, all of that on any metric, it's just not a very sort of enthusiastic or encouraging scenario, right? So, and why do we continue doing this? Purely for the same reason that you are continuing to be an entrepreneur, right? Because the odds are against you as you start off as an entrepreneur, right? But we continue to believe in this, and we believe that there is opportunity for value creation and money to be made, right? And therefore everybody participates in this. And what are we betting on? We're betting on people like you. We're betting on the larger trend of the Indian consumption story, more opportunities emerging out of India, which is also what a lot of international players and companies are looking at India for, which is what explains there's so much of interest in money coming into the country, in making investments and participating in PPP projects and et cetera, right? Because everybody continues to believe in that story. The question is, what is the time horizon? So I don't believe that you'll have a scenario where it's going to be a get-rich-quick kind of approach. You don't start a company in January and exit in December. That's not going to happen. So you therefore need persistence. You need genuine customer traction, right? And you need to be therefore very focused and sort of build something for the long haul, which is say a 5-year kind of a scenario. Okay, and it's been our experience as well that the companies that we have invested in typically, they take longer to mature and grow and create value than in the US for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But therefore, both the entrepreneur and us need to have that kind of early stage mindset that you're able to hang out with the entrepreneur and sort of partner with them as you go through this journey. And that's the key attribute. So it's not that I invest now and in 2 years' time I'm putting pressure on you, good God, let's get out.
Yeah.
If that's not the rules of the game.
Scenario, right? Are there like 3 key reasons in your mind why entrepreneurs or why companies fail? So there are, scaling is one, you can't get to first few customers, etc. So, but specifically in the India specific scenario, is there something that entrepreneurs should watch out for?
Yeah.
And at least from your experience, and you see a lot of the startup ecosystem.
The reasons than a US or India, because I don't know the US market that well. So I will talk about why things, sometimes the ventures fail here. One is not really defining your value proposition well, as to why somebody must buy, use, consume your product service. A very clear value proposition which is defining a problem, saying that this is the reason my company must exist, or this is what I want to do for a certain set of consumers. 2, sometimes sort of scaling too soon and being very dispersed either geographically or target segment wise. Sometimes people will open in Delhi, Bangalore, one store here, one store there, without having fully understood the business model. Or what are the different legs of business model. So it's better to focus on a smaller area, one target segment or a geography, so you understand who's really likes my target segment, who's really my target segment, who bites my value proposition, for whom it's the most valuable thing. Then go after them. So whether it's, if you say I want to go geographically, from Bangalore to Delhi, then you at least know it is 30-year-old guy with 1 child or 2 children, or living in a central city, or not a migrant. Maybe you define like that. If you look at something like Redbus, which we were one of the first investors, we were the first investors in 2007. February.
6 years now.
6 years ago. So when they came to us, they had just launched a few months prior to that. They were selling, 35 tickets or some very small number, 5, 6 tickets. So they came to
5
us,
tickets a day.
something like that, no, very small number. So they came to us, said that we're going to launch we are in Bangalore. We don't want to extend our service to outside Bangalore. We will understand this consumer. So that time they were selling in Bangalore only credit card consumers. Now, so from what I said earlier, don't expand, geographically, blah blah blah. So our natural tendency would have been to say, fine, stick to Bangalore. But Redbus value proposition was the ability to take you from point A to point B, give you options of different. So we said confining it to one city is perhaps not right. Maybe you confine it to South, but you don't go all India. You confine it to South. You say, let me figure out the South market. And we also suggested maybe you want to look at cash and military, because the larger market in this would be. So we didn't want them to go all India from day one. They were only in Bangalore. So we said, those are the choices that you need to make as an entrepreneur. Let's look at job, because your value proposition is stronger when you have at least connecting 2-3 cities. Otherwise, just saying for Bangalore consumer to go to here and there, it doesn't make sense. And anyway, he's going to Bangalore from Chennai, then he's coming back from Chennai. So you anyway have to tie up the Chennai operator. So they had only tied up with Bangalore operator. So we said, let's just look at the South as a geography, because that's the reach the consumer is looking for. And that's how they scaled up. So Redbus in that sense, I think, has several lessons for all of us, who are in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because the very clear and strong value proposition, they defined it from day one. They tweaked the product very little. You made it better UI, you added now mobile apps and stuff like that. But basic, that here is a place, I'm going to aggregate all the bus operators that exist, so you don't go from travel agent to travel agent, is a strong value proposition. So I think so first was the value proposition definition, scaling too soon. We've had other companies that scaled too soon and then realized, let me pull back. Printer was a very good example. We had again there often talked about into our investment that let's just focus on Bangalore at best south, that understand what is my size of the store that works well, what's the customer segment that I should target, is it SMB or individual or a large, where should my location be, it should be in a high street MG road or should be commercial street, let's define all that. Then the new investor came in and they put in a lot of money and they said, no, you've got to be in Delhi, you've got to be in Bombay. If you're not in Delhi, Bombay, nobody will notice you. So they opened Delhi, Bombay, but managing it from Bangalore to Delhi didn't work. So they had to shut it down. So that's what we call, before you define your value proposition, scaling to. Third is, I think, relentless execution, of the details. There's nothing, there's no rocket science in this. Just making sure, keeping a strong focus on the consumer or your customer and saying, I'm here to serve him or her, and what is the best way I do it, so understanding the market signals, understanding the consumer signals, reading between the lines about why they're buying, why they're not buying. Those are very, very important. I think that's the other reason people often fail, that, I understand my consumers, I know it all kind of attitude if you have. Then the third, I think those to me would be the top three. One of my first investments in Bangalore was in 2000, the prehistoric era. And it was a company called iEnabling, and we were all charged up. They were coming up with this. I don't know. Many of you may have been toddlers or not born at that time, but those days you didn't have internet so much. You had if dial-up was the norm, people didn't have two phone lines. If you're using a dial-up, then the phone is being used, and it was such a slow speed, blah blah blah. So they came up a small device, which eye-enabling device. In some senses, I'd like to believe it was a precursor to tablet. But if you can imagine that kind of a size, but very crude UI, with clunky keyboard and no touch screen. But it worked. It had an Outlook Express on it, so you worked offline on the emails, then you plugged in and then it sent the emails when you plugged in. So you didn't have to be, those is Hotmail, you had to be online to send emails, right? The cost of being online non-stop was high in India. And it was meant to be for people who were not, who were sort of technologically, not challenged, but sort of wary of the technology. So they wouldn't be comfortable looking at all this 10,000 apps that are running on a sort of laptop. We launched it on IT.com. Was it 2001 or 2000? That November, and we had a queue of people signing up. 7,000 in one day signed up. The product wasn't ready. It was just more an R&D product that we were showcasing. And it was crude, but it was small in size that you could carry. It was sturdy, so the dust and everything wouldn't matter. And when we launched it, we were all excited. Wow, this is it. This is our big winner, blah, blah, blah. So the company went, bought lots of components, started manufacturing it, hired a sales and marketing guy, and who was from the printers world, so he understood the accessory business, and he understood the computer world, and that he would sell everywhere, had dealers meet, all that we did. We even had a consumer marketing guy who was selling, consumer products, not the technology, and nobody bought. So 7,000 people who signed up, who'd given us their addresses, 3/4 were wrong. So when you wrote to them saying the product is ready, would you like to buy, 3/4 letters came back undelivered, mobile phones were switched off or not right, and stuff like that. So I think
no different COD model.
Don't get carried away, talk face to face to consumers and say, here it is. The consumer is ready to put the money on the table. It's only an intent, and yeah, it looks nice, I might consider buying. That's what he's saying. But Indians don't want to be rude to people, and so they'll say, yeah, great product. But till you get the first check or first money from a consumer, your value proposition isn't defined well, or it isn't known what it was. So there again, we scaled very quickly because 7,000 in Bangalore said, yeah, and long queue. So let's go and sell all south. All the inventory came back, and then there was no capital left in the company.
value proposition and all that. Right? The product marketing piece is the most crucial part, okay? Independent of what it is that you're selling. And I believe that is one area where there's an enormous gap today. In other words, packaging your product for a specific customer segment and building a roadmap for it. All too often a feature is packaged as a product, okay? And you know, the difference between a feature, a business, a product, a company, and an organization. So understanding the trajectory is very, very important. So, you know, a feature is a very cool thing that you've done, doesn't mean that it's going to be a great product or generate great business, right? And all too often we get excited with that. The second thing is, you know, we get excessively carried away by TechCrunch and, you know, stuff of that kind. And we immediately start trying to do stuff. And that again, marrying the product to the market is very crucial. And understanding how it works in your market context is very crucial. Not because some dude in the valley did it, therefore I will also do it, right? That's meaningless, unless you really understand the market context. Third is particularly those of us who are doing so-called internet-y kinds of plays or mobile-only kinds of plays. You have to understand that all said and done in a market like this, and also true in Asia, there has to be a physical connect at some point. For example, if you're in a music example, right, while you're doing streaming music and all that, there has to be some offline component, like a meetup, for example, of music lovers, right? And then you use the Twang to kind of, you know, further that. Those who are selling books and everything else, you know, maybe have a book club set up. Something that gives people the belief that this is real, and hence you start getting a lot of feedback. Because if you look at, let's say, and typically, you know, most of our models seem to emanate from the US, right? There, the evolution has been very, very different of how people have behaved with technology, how people interact with each other, right? More often than not, it is either on a phone or, you know, some a remote device. So people are very comfortable with it. I don't need to necessarily meet you at all. So behaviorally, particularly those aiming at the consumer end, you have to understand that. It cannot be 100%, you know, virtual. Whether it's by way of logistics, whether it's by way of credibility generation, whether it's by way of reaching out to a community to generate that buzz, you know, things of that nature, okay? You look at even companies here, like for example, a Yahoo hackathon, right, is what? It is their way of generating a buzz around themselves, isn't it? So that's what it is. So you need to come up with stuff that generates a lot of this. You can do a hackathon online as well, right? But the point is you don't do that, okay? So these are kinds of things that I would suggest that you consider as well as you make progress, you know, in your business.
Maybe a lot of people relate to it. So as an entrepreneur, when you put together a startup, you pretty much put together using your personal savings, whatever. You get it to a certain stage where you know, you have a product out in the market, you have consumers, you have people using it, you even have you know, sight of some revenue, but at the same time you need to, you know, continue scaling, right? So based on your investments and all the startups you've seen, what has worked? Would you say, let me monetize on whatever I've done already because you already have a ready-made product, people like it, it's being used? Or do you say, you know, let me invest more? Of course, the source of funds is something which is secondary, but you know, do you say, let me invest more, and you know, that has to continue, right? So how do you balance both out?
See, take this both together.
If I can just add to this, like,
There's a minimum that you need to do to be able to monetize, right? So the important thing from any external person's point of view is, are you growing month on month on the key metrics, whatever the metrics are for your business? So that's the ultimate test. Are people liking what you're putting out there? And there's a kind of a crude way it is put in the valley, right? They'll say, does the dog eat the dog food?
Right.
Okay. So unless that happens, it doesn't matter what you're doing. The recipe is not working. So that by putting more money into the same recipe or by having a better kitchen, it doesn't work, right? So the point is, whatever metrics are relevant, are you growing month on month? That's the most fundamental thing. That means people are finding something useful, right? And whether it's engagement, whatever metrics, right, are those increasing? That's the key.
You have to do both. So like Sanjay said, you do with this minimum viable product, you throw it in the market, see what the traction is, and simultaneously, you're improving the product and getting feedback adding more features or whatever. I mean, even Facebook, look at it, I mean, how it has changed, right? So that is very constantly engaging with the consumer's customer. I think that's really, really the most important. Till you do that well, and it's harder to build a larger company.